Lightsaber combat is nothing new to the Jedi or Sith. This has been a part of their culture since the very beginning. While the Jedi may have been sworn protectors of peace, the Sith, on the other hand, seek only power and dominance. And due to these conflicting beliefs and many other reasons, this eventually led to the Jedi's creation of the 7 lightsaber forms. However, while the Jedi may have encouraged the Jedi to explore the unknown aspects of the Force and lightsaber combat, there were some forms that they deemed forbidden, or at the very least looked heavily down upon. But what were they and what made them so different? Well, before we can discuss the forbidden lightsaber forms, we first need to explore the 7 original forms. The first and oldest of them being Form 1, Shi Cho, which basically was the first form taught to all Jedi at the temple. It teaches the basic moves of attack and parry. Next, Form 2, or Makashi. This was widely considered as the most elegant of all the forms, as it was specifically designed for lightsaber to lightsaber combat. Form 3, Sorzu, was the ultimate expression of defense, and was preferred for Jedi who did not wish to take life and only sought peace. Form 4, Ataru, was the most acrobatic of all the forms and requires its practitioner to stay constantly on the offensive and is most effectively used against one opponent. Form 5, Xian/Degem So, was the most physically demanding of all the combat styles. It is naturally very aggressive, and while it has 2 variants of it, both of them are fairly similar as both rely on attacking their opponent. Form 6 was known as Naman and was primarily used by Jedi counselors who have chosen to not make a career out of combat. It was considered to be the most balanced of all the forms and a hybrid of all of them, which basically means it was a mix of all the forms together. And finally, Form 7, Juyo. This form was the most controversial of all the forms while not being forbidden, and this form was not widely taught within the Jedi Order. Its attacks were vicious and unpredictable and were very aggressive, and the reason it was heavily frowned upon within the Order was due to its dark side tendencies. With the 7 lightsaber forms out of the way, let's get on to the forbidden forms. The first one actually being a variant of Form 7, that being Vaapad. Vaapad was created by the renowned Jedi Master Mace Windu, who, after realizing that he had an inner darkness that could be used, decided to channel it into a form. Now, Vaapad, unlike Juyo, wasn't about turning one's own emotions or feelings to power their strikes and giving them strength. Instead, it was about using the emotions of their opponent against them, which basically means that the practitioner must bring their own emotions to the forefront and go to the very edge of the light side, just barely behind the dark. And when this happens, it reflects the opponent's darkness against them. And this, as you would guess, was very risky, as it tapped so heavily on the dark side, and due to this, many Jedi were very concerned when Mace Windu began to study it. This form was given the title as one of the most difficult and demanding of all the forms, due to its incredibly aggressive and dark side nature. And nothing summed this up better than Anakin Skywalker himself. We get this excerpt from Revenge of the Sith novel. Vaapad is as aggressive and as powerful as its namesake, but its power comes at a great risk. Emergence in Vaapad opens the gates that restrains one's inner darkness. To use Vaapad, a Jedi must allow himself to enjoy the fight. He must give himself over to the thrill of battle, the rush of winning. Vaapad is a path that leads through the penumbra of the dark side. Mace Windu created this style, and he is the only living master. And then it goes on to state that Vaapad is a channel for darkness, and that goes both ways. From this, we can gather that the Jedi viewed the form to be too far and that the Sith believed it didn't go far enough. While there is still so much more to explore about Vaapad, that topic will have to wait for another time. For now, let's turn our attention to another fascinating and controversial technique, Tracata. This form revolves around exploiting the lightsaber's ability to be turned off and turned on mid-duel, a tactic that could completely shift the tide of a fight. Imagine this, a Jedi and a Sith locked in a heated battle. Suddenly, the Jedi feints an attack, deactivating their blade at the last second and reactivating it directly within their opponent's chest. The move was so quick, so deceptive, that it could end a duel in the blink of an eye. Because of its cunning nature, Tracata was deemed forbidden by both the Jedi and Sith alike. For the Jedi, it was seen as a blatant affront to their code, embodying deception and dishonor, qualities that they worked to avoid. Many also considered it to be unsportsmanlike, an unfair trick that sold their purity of the lightsaber combat. On the other hand, the Sith rejected this for an entirely different reason. To them, Tracata was a cheap, cowardly ploy that betrayed the ideals of strength and dominance. A true Sith, they believed, should overpower their opponent with sheer mastery of the dark side and lightsaber skills, not to resort to tricks. Ironically, this controversial form was actually developed by a Jedi counselor, a member of the Order known for prioritizing the Force over combat. Counselors typically avoided battle whenever possible, viewing violence as a last resort, which makes Tracata's origins all the more surprising. Despite its potential effectiveness, this technique was ultimately regarded by most as weak and cowardly, tainted by the same deception it relied upon. Yet, for all the disdain it garnered, its very existence adds a fascinating wrinkle to the history of lightsaber combat. And now we arrive at the final two forbidden lightsaber techniques, which, like Tracata, are less full-fledged forms and more specific combat maneuvers that are shrouded in controversy. The first of which being Mou Kei, a brutal and highly destructive technique, and when translated, it means to dismember. This maneuver involves severing multiple limbs in a single calculated strike. The Jedi viewed this as utterly unforgivable, believing it to be dark and barbaric, as it inflicted unbearable pain and suffering, a clear deviation from their values of restraint and compassion. Yet, history shows us that even the most virtuous of Jedi sometimes resort to such extremes, the most notable of being Obi-Wan Kenobi, who would use a triple Mou Kei on his fateful duel with Anakin Skywalker on Mustafar. The act itself exemplifies why the technique was forbidden. The Jedi believed it caused such excruciating torment, even to an enemy, it opened the doors to the dark side, a line that should never be crossed. The second forbidden technique is even more chilling, Sai Tok. This devastating move involves slicing an opponent's body clean in half. To the Jedi, Sai Tok represented the peak of brutality and severed an undeniable evidence to the user's surrender to fury and dark emotions. Such an act was considered grotesque and unnecessary, a stark betrayal of the Jedi's moral principles. Unsurprisingly, this technique was banned almost entirely, deemed appropriate only against droids or inanimate objects. And yet, Obi-Wan Kenobi once again would use a forbidden move in a moment of desperation, this time being on Darth Maul on Naboo. And while Obi-Wan did cleave Maul in half, Maul would survive, although the injuries would leave him physically and emotionally scarred, leaving Maul half the man he once was. Both Mou Kei and Sai Tok are stark reminders of the fine line the Jedi walk in their commitment to the light. These techniques, while forbidden, were wielded by one of their own in dire moments, highlighting the complex and sometimes contradictory nature of the Jedi's philosophy. And there you have it, the 4 forbidden lightsaber forms / techniques that the Jedi and sometimes Sith refuse to use. What are your thoughts on this? Do you feel like they should have been forbidden? Let me know in the comments. I really hope you enjoyed today's video. If you did, it would mean a lot to me if you could like and subscribe, as it would help the channel out a ton. Thank you so much Star Wars with a Z for this awesome video idea. And if you want to watch another video just like this, make sure to click on screen now. And with that, my fellow Star Wars nerds, may the Force be with you.